June 20th, 2018. At this time, I invite the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Leona Romeo Marlin, to address you. Prime Minister.
Good morning to all, my colleagues, ministers, members of the press. Good morning, St. Martin. This morning, I'm quite pleased to inform you that plans are in full swing for a Hurricane Expo with the theme of taking charge that falls in line with the disaster conference that was held earlier in May. The goal of the Taking Charge Hurricane Expo is to bring about awareness to the general public on St. Martin on what is available to them as they make their hurricane preparedness plans. This initiative is a collaborative effort of the government of St. Martin and the St. Martin Chamber of Commerce. The Taking Charge Hurricane Expo is scheduled for August 4th at the Bel Air Community Center in Cahill from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. The organizers of the event are aiming to have a cross-section of businesses represented in areas such as banking, insurance, appraisers, hardware stores, supermarkets, medical and pharmaceutical suppliers, and shutter and home protection manufacturers. Government emergency supporting functions and non-governmental organizations that respond during disasters will be present also to share pertinent information with attendees during the Hurricane Expo. A special feature of the expo will be a cook-off of competition during lunch where selected food vendors will have the task of preparing the best tasting hurricane cuisine using only food that is available after the passing of a major hurricane. As the date draws closer to the event, more information will be forthcoming. Thus, I am inviting you, the community, to the first Taking Charge Hurricane Expo on August 4th. On June 13th, Rodney Richardson, my policy advisor, represented St. Martin at the UNDP Crisis Preparedness and Resilience Workshop in Barbados. The objective of the workshop was to take stock of lessons, challenges, and major milestones in implementing recovery and reconstruction programs throughout the Caribbean region and to identify key gaps and suggest improvements in the current approach to recovery programming. The workshop was divided into 4 sessions. The first, to constructively reflect upon challenges and lessons learned with the objective of identifying what can be done better in preparation for the next hurricane season. The second, to discuss key processes that facilitate the implementation of recovery. The third, to share experiences on ongoing recovery programs and to reflect on needs for improvement and using recovery as an opportunity to strengthen resilience in the region. The final session introduced key concepts of recovery preparedness. A key lesson learned during the workshop is recovery is not a sprint, it is a marathon. Thus, the emphasis should be on doing things better, not faster, to ensure resilience. Tomorrow, June 21st, I will be heading to Parliament to discuss the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. After months of preparation, the NRRP will be presented to the members of Parliament as our roadmap toward building back St. Martin better. The NRRP is a knowledge-based document that has been prepared by more than 170 national and international experts with input from a long list of organizations and stakeholders. Together, they have developed a comprehensive strategy to respond to the immediate needs of the people of St. Martin and a plan to address other recovery and resilience needs in the near future. In Parliament, I hope that all political parties can unite and support the NRRP, as this will be the guiding document for the recovery process in the years to come. As we are discussing the NRRP, the recruitment process for the different positions in the National Recovery Program Bureau is progressing rapidly. The application period for the director position has been closed. I am glad to report that we have received a significant amount of applications. For the next step in the selection process, the selection committee will evaluate the received applications, and based on a scoring system that is used by the World Bank worldwide, the selection committee will invite the 3 highest scoring candidates for interviews, after which 1 candidate will be nominated for the position. The same procedure will be applied for all other vacancies of the Bureau. I continue to encourage those interested to keep an eye open for the new vacancies that will be published on the government information page, in the Daily Herald, the government's website, and the Facebook of the National Recovery Bureau. I want to confirm the news report in the Daily Herald newspaper, that on June 13th, all public servants were informed of the delay to the changes to the pension scheme that were scheduled for July 1st, 2018, that will now take place on January 1st, 2019. As background, I would like to inform you that on January 21st, 2017, the Minister of General Affairs and Finance and the unions represented in the GEOA agreed to amend the pension plans for civil servants. The aim of the amendment is to make the pension scheme sustainable for civil servants in the future, as well as to improve the financial position of the General Pension Fund of St. Martin, APS, by increasing the retirement age from 62 to 65 years, with the possibility of retiring at the age of 62 with a lower pension. Another proposed change to the scheme include no longer using the final scheme. The pension will be based on an average salary scheme and a yearly accrual of 2% of the gross salary in that year. The percentage can be lowered up to 1.75% if the pension premiums no longer cover the cost. There are additional proposed changes to the pension scheme that have been shared with the civil servants in a previous letter dated March 7th of this year. Information sessions by Personnel Department and APS will be organized to inform all civil servants on the proposed changes. I thank you for your attention and await any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Public Health, Social Development, and Labor, the Honorable Emma Lee, to address you. Minister Lee.
Good morning, fellow ministers, press, and those listening by television, radio, or internet. You know, as has been mentioned, I think, in the media, that you know, we're planning on swearing in the new government shortly, and I think it's a good opportunity to thank my colleague, Minister Ferrier, for his time and his service to the country. You know, we've been friends for many years, but I really have enjoyed working with you. It's nice to have somebody who thinks the same, who gets as frustrated as I do sometimes with how things work within government, and you will be sorely missed. And your contributions, I don't know if everybody would recognize it, but I know personally how much time and energy and effort you've put into trying to help the country. So I thank you, and I think the country should thank you as well. On another note, I noticed that Mr. Hilbert Haar is not here. As I understand, he is also planning on moving on. His time here when he was working with the Today newspaper and with the St. Martin News, again, another person that will be missed. His journalistic integrity and qualities, I think, have brought a lot to the country and certainly to our press conferences. I'd like to sort of touch on a subject that we've talked about in the past, but just I've gotten a lot of questions about it and some comments and suggestions, and this is really regarding the reconstruction work permitting process. So just to lay out the normal process, in other words, let's say pre-IRMA, the normal process for applying for a work permit includes registering the vacancy, and then you had to place an ad in the newspaper and then wait for 5 weeks and see if there were any candidates that were locally available. And then at that point, you could submit your application for permission for a work permit, and that would then take about 6 weeks for processing. So altogether, that's technically 11 weeks, 12 weeks, so call it 3 months process. Post-IRMA, clearly the need for reconstruction workers has increased dramatically. There's been a number of efforts to train local people, also, of course, to ensure that there's been labor drives, recruitment drives of all different types to ensure that people who are interested in working in construction and reconstruction do have jobs. We've exhausted those efforts. We will continue with training efforts. And of course, if people who are interested in participating are still interested in working, of course, the ministry will facilitate finding jobs for anyone who's interested in working in construction. But that said, we also need to ensure that the reconstruction process happens as quickly as possible. And this is a topic we discussed previously, that based on Article 7 of the implementation decree, and based on the shortage of construction workers, we are looking at an expedited process for project-based requests. So in particular, what that means is that we would waive the requirement for the advertising and 5-week waiting period, so that will reduce or eliminate that 5-week period. And in addition, we will expedite the processing time. I mean, we're looking at being able to process requests within a week, 2 weeks. Again, all with the understanding that we need to expedite the availability of workers to expedite the reconstruction process. Some of the requirements are that the company needs to be in good standing, needs to be registered at the tax department, and they need to submit a housing plan. In other words, if you're going to bring in groups of construction workers for project-based work, you need to explain how you're going to find housing for them, because we certainly don't want through this process that we end up displacing people or driving up rental prices for our locals to find apartments. So we want to know how you're going to manage that process. And I want to be clear, some of the conditions are that, number one, of course, the employees who come need to pay their social premiums and their taxes, and that the permits are non-transferable. In other words, if you come in for a project, you're not going to be able to move from that company to another company, and it can be renewed once, and the maximum total duration would be a 3-year period. So we see this as a positive thing because it means that we're expediting the process to give permissions for people to come. We're ensuring that they're compliant with our regulations to ensure that the social premiums and taxes are being paid. And it also means that once that reconstruction phase is finished, that they will leave the island and therefore not end up staying and being competition for our local construction workers. And then post-IRMA, we also recognize that for those requesting regular work permits, in other words, not based on this Article 7, we are still waiving the advertising requirement, so cutting down that 5-week period or eliminating that 5-week period, but then we would go through a normal evaluation process, although expedited. So some of the criteria that are used for the evaluation process will all remain intact. And the important distinction is that this permit would be renewable, right? So just like a regular work permit. Now, based on some of the feedback that we've received and some of the questions that we've received, where we have construction companies saying, look, okay, I have a number of small houses or a number of projects, smaller projects, so it isn't one big hotel or it isn't the airport project, but I have a series of sequential projects that, in my opinion, or in their opinion, adds up to a project as well. And so what we are looking at, based on feedback from our political colleagues and as well as feedback we've received from the community, for our post-IRMA reconstruction project-based process, we're looking at expanding the definition or interpretation of projects. So not that it necessarily has to be one single project, but that you still need to explain, okay, I have a series of projects and a timeline for that. So we're looking to broaden the definition to make it, again, facilitate the reconstruction process. The ministry is working on preparing the advice, and actually will submit it to Council of Ministers for their approval next week, because I think it's also important that this is done in collaboration with justice. Actually, Alita, you had mentioned in one of our previous press conferences, how do we ensure that the people are going to leave the island when they're done? And so that list of when people's permits are expiring is shared with justice, and then it's justice's responsibility to ensure that the people leave. We have looked at the possibility of if you could hold businesses responsible, but again, a business cannot go and physically take somebody and bring them to the airplane, so they don't have the legal rights to do it. But we will ensure that if the employee stops working with that company, that's reported to us and thereby reported to the Justice Department, and also as the contracts come due, that the Justice Department's well aware and ensures that the people leave the island. So we're doing our best to coordinate across ministries. So the second topic I'd like to touch on is, we've mentioned that it is important that as much as possible our people participate in the reconstruction process, and we continue to offer training opportunities. There's another initiative through the ministry where we're going to be hosting a labor drive for technical and vocational courses that are going to be offered at NEPA in collaboration with MIC IT. So this is a training institute. So we are going to have a registration drive June 28th and June 29th in the Government Administration Building, ground floor, room 2, between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. So I'll repeat that. That's June 28th and June 29th at the Government Administration Building on the ground floor, room 2, between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And we're going to be offering training courses for masonry level 1, plumbing level 1, electrical installation level 1, welding level 1, and general property maintenance level 1. And I'll give you a phone number just in case if you're interested for more information, 520-5270. That's 520-5270. Again, this is part of the ministry's ongoing efforts to ensure that we're offering not only access to jobs, but also access to training for those who are interested in working in reconstruction. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you, Minister Lee, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Michael Ferrier, to address you. Minister Ferrier.
Good morning, members of the press, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. This is my last press conference, and so I'm going to be a little bit long-winded. In January 2018, at our very first press briefing, I opened and asked the question, how do we together get St. Martin going again? That the task was going to be challenging at best, we knew. The team put together by MPs Heiliger, Westcott Williams, and Brownbill to govern the battered country had their work cut out for them in what was then already known would be a relatively short term in office. I said from the onset I was not interested in being more than a pinch hitter, and therefore did not take part in the February 26th election. And so here I stand at this last weekly press briefing on the first Leona Marlin cabinet, in which I proudly served as Minister of Finance. I take the opportunity to give an account of what has been accomplished as much as I can, make suggestions for items that still need attention, and express my appreciation for the support and assistance I've received. I start off by thanking Minister Lee and the Prime Minister, who talked to me briefly before we came in, for their words of thanks already. While this is goodbye as minister, I have a feeling that wanted or not wanted, asked or not asked, invited or not, I will on occasion provide my 2 cents as citizen Mike Ferrier when I think it's warranted. And so I ask your patience, as this may be a little bit long-winded, as I said, but believe it's the right way to close my tenure. Back at the start of this assignment, we knew that it was going to be quite a job after Irma, with hardly any money in the coffers and very little trust, if any, from our kingdom partner Holland, who in the meantime, back in November, had offered the generous amount of 550 million euros to help us out of the post-Irma mess, albeit with conditions. My marching orders were to get as much of those 550 million euros that were pledged as possible in the form of a grant, a gift, rather than a loan. Fast forward to April 16, 2018, when myself and the Prime Minister were in Washington to witness the signing of the agreement, we were able to get a firm commitment for 470 of the 550 million, or 85% of the total, in the form of a grant. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back in January, government was facing a financial crisis, and unfortunately, it still does. Getting to actually spend the 470 million euros to bring relief to our people in dire straits would be a whole other story. First order of business was to get much needed liquidity support to keep government operational. By February 26th, State Secretary Knops and I were able to sign the first 50 million gila liquidity support loan documents that provided St. Martin with a 0% interest, 30-year loan with no payments due for the first 5 years. That arrangement gave St. Martin some financial breathing space. From the onset, we expressed our desire to develop practical solutions in order to tackle the multiple overarching cross-ministries challenges, having been able to watch our predecessors function as if there were 7 different governments instead of one government with 7 different ministries. We, under the leadership of Prime Minister Leona Marlin, we made a commitment to not make that mistake, and I'm proud to say that in hindsight, the Leona Marlin Cabinet 1 succeeded to almost always deliver on that commitment. From the onset, we also realized that a lack of trust in the body politic of St. Martin by the Dutch government needed reversing, if not at least greatly improving. The return of mutual respect needed to be sought and massaged. I believe on this front, we're all well on our way, overlooking a few hiccups. On Tuesday, February 6th, 2018, the Ministry of Finance of the Government of St. Martin organized a roundtable conference, Sustainable Financial Government, with the Netherlands, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the Committee for Financial Supervision of Curaçao and St. Martin, the CFT. The goal of this conference was to get all parties together and to have an open dialogue on the way forward to a financial sustainable St. Martin, and also how to achieve progress in bringing relief in the short term to our people. This last goal, unfortunately, is still a work in progress. From January to now, a tremendous amount of people hours has gone into learning the rules of engagement on all levels, and personally, I'm convinced that we're now closer to that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow than we have ever been. Working together in the Council of Ministers to solve practical problems to ease the pain of our people, in spite of the acute lack of sufficient funds, has been truly inspiring. My respect goes out to many hardworking civil servants who I have come to know throughout the organization, and at the same time, it is my hope that the others will step up to the plate and realize that being able to serve the people and the public is a privilege. The budget 2018 was the big item on our to-do list, and it took our experts quite some doing to prepare it and then for us to defend it in Parliament and to the CFT, given that it is not a balanced budget. Just like 2017, our reality is that we had more expenditure than income. Thank goodness, because of the amazing half of an island's, thank God, because of this amazing half of an island's resilience, our deficit is lower than first feared, but the reality is we still have a serious financial challenge. But this is not rocket science. The faster we get the economy humming, the less dependent on outside help we will be. We need our airport back. We need our hotel rooms back. We need inexpensive loans to be made available to keep the doors open of proven businesses with good track records now in dire straits because of the post-Irma slowdown economy. We need to start a top-of-the-mind destination awareness campaign, letting the rest of the world know that we are well on our way back, so that come this Christmas season, except for some scars, it will be like it never happened. To this end, in an effort to seek additional funding besides the Dutch/World Bank Trust Fund, we are working with the central bank and have requested the CFT to give their advice on our idea to float a bond on short notice to help fund the above-mentioned very short-term goals. In the past 5 months, we have been able to work on cost-cutting measures, and I'm thrilled to say that in yesterday's Council of Ministers meeting, we passed a 33-item list of these cost-cutting measures, of which 4 of them are subject to our parliamentarians' approval, which I'm sure we will undoubtedly get. I'm also pleased to finally be able to share the list of measures with you, with the footnote that many of the legally regulated items will require a voluntary sign-off by all those affected, but who want to do their bit of contributing to St. Martin's solution rather than to continue being part of its problems. We've also made great strides in advancing the efforts to improve our tax administration and collection system. These preparatory actions are needed if we are to maximize the scarce financial resources at our disposal. I have my successors' commitment to keep on this vital track. To improve our income, we have been working on every front. The pension reforms for government workers is back on the front burner. Government built up significant arrears to APS in the last years. Part of the problem is that the pension system is no longer feasible in this modern day and age, where people live longer and want to work longer. Also, investments don't return what they used to, and costs are skyrocketing. As such, the pension fund has been working on reforms together with government. These reforms are also required by the CFT. The pension system is now scheduled to go into effect at the start of 2019. The benefit of the bottom line of government, especially in these tough financial times, is significant. With the changes, government will be able to meet the financial obligations and eliminate financial arrears. This is good for the pension fund and ultimately for the future retirees. I've also taken good note of underperforming areas of income of government. One of these is that which has to get the government's coffers through the Bureau Telecom and Post, the so-called BTP. Reports about the BTP show that the institution should and can contribute more to government. The concession and spectrum fees are collected on behalf of and should be transferred to government after deduction of reasonable operational costs. In the last years, BTP has not contributed anywhere near what government expects. The inefficiency and lack of legal compliance at BTP needs to change so government can receive its fair share. To this end, we have prepared recommendations for measures to be taken at BTP, and these will be made available to the Minister of TIAT, who by law is the responsible minister. I believe that the first order of business is accountability. BTP needs to give proper account for its operations and ensure that the income due to government is transferred to government in a timely manner. I had hoped to see these measures through to implementation, but I'm convinced that this initiative will be continued. The need for funds certainly isn't going to go away. Government needs to maximize its revenues. While heading the Ministry of Finance, efforts in getting our financial statements in order were promoted and pushed. When we entered office, the financial statement for 2016 had not yet been prepared. It is still late. The ministry is now working on getting the statement completed and sent to the auditors and Parliament. Speaking of which, the backlog in handling the financial statements of previous years is also underway. The General Audit Chamber, the CFT, and others have made it clear that this is not a positive trend. If the schedule developed at the ministry is followed, we can get this done before the end of the year. Key for all of us to understand is that practical solutions can always be found, but will and desire to be part of the solution is necessary. I want to take time to address the issue of the government-owned companies. These are strategic companies that have been placed at a distance from government organization but remain the assets of government. Putting them at a distance to avoid conflicts of interest is good. However, these companies ultimately have to serve the broader interest of this country. The people charged with managing and overseeing these entities have great authority, but also great responsibility. Just as ministers are responsible for financial management and policy achievements of their respective ministries, so too are managing directors and supervisory board members responsible for the operational and strategic well-being of the company that they serve. When something goes wrong at a ministry, Parliament can call a minister to give account. Ministers can be sent home with a motion of no confidence. We have experienced government and Parliament being sent packing for lack of management and total incompetence. Right now, we are experiencing the consequence of not doing the right thing or taking action when we know something is wrong. It should not be so that the public prosecutor has to go into an NV to uncover problems that have been subject of rumors for years. We should be very concerned about companies taking on debt to unsustainable levels. These are our assets, and while they are limited liability entities, the failure of any one of them could be catastrophic to the government and to all of us. Ministers are appointed as shareholder representatives for companies and other government entities, and should be very vigilant of what has happened in the past and what is planned for the future. Bad management should not be rewarded, incompetence should not be ignored, and breaking the law should be investigated and punished. We are about to get started with the reconstruction of St. Martin, almost 10 months after Irma. The requirements, rules, procedures, and bureaucracy has been hard for me to understand, but I realize it is mostly a self-imposed burden. Successive governments have let things slide. The attitude has not gone unnoticed from the partners on the other side of the ocean, from who we now get help, and we are subject to their conditions. We wanted autonomy, but with that comes responsibility, and unfortunately, we were not prepared for the worst-case scenario. The help we have been offered comes at a price. And I say, unless we have an alternative, let's pay it gladly, but use the resources carefully to build a better country that will be better able to stand on its own feet. On a personal note, I leave today with a bittersweet feeling. It was never my intention to stay on long. That was something I stated from the very beginning. But I had hoped to achieve much more. Where I would have wanted to run with the ball, many times I had to walk, sometimes stand still, sometimes even backtrack. That was the frustrating part. Nevertheless, I believe a lot got done. There is a budget 2018, another is being prepared, the financial statements are in process, and backlogs have been worked down. Liquidity was arranged. We kept the lights on and services flowing. Plans have been prepared and some are in execution. Most importantly, communication with stakeholders internally and externally has been reestablished. This was not a one-man, one-woman job. It took a team to achieve. I want to take time to thank the wonderful people in our cabinet, Shakira Breinhardt, Velda Windeveld, Shadira Francisca, Jaap van Duinkerke, and Martin Hassink. I want to thank the two coffee room ladies, Thelma and Mrs. Brown, for all the bush tea that they brought me every single day. The ladies that I would meet every morning cleaning my office. All the professionals in the Ministry of Finance and throughout the government organization, as well as all others from inside and outside government who believed no challenge was too big and who I could always call on for help, guidance, and advice. And lest you forget, a word of appreciation to the media. You got the message out, you kept us sharp. I consider myself lucky to have been given the opportunity to do something that makes it hard to say goodbye. So instead of a goodbye, I say, we're gonna catch up. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Ferrier, for your opening remarks. We now go over to the question and answer session. Stephen Cerulean of PJ82 Radio, you have the floor.
You've been very understanding as it pertains to knowing the role of the media. Hence, you have made the communications even more easier. My question is for the Minister of VSA. You spoke of the fact that the work permit for construction workers is something that you're looking at very closely. First of all, Minister, how many of those requests have been received by the ministry? And B, how many of them have so far been processed?
Stephen, which requests are you talking about? I'd have to come back to you with exact numbers, but in general, I can tell you that there has not been a large influx of requests for construction work permits. So through the regular process, there's not been a large influx. And in general, all of the requests that we've received have been granted. I'm a bit concerned personally as to why there has not been a large influx. We have started to receive correspondences from companies based on the previous press announcement about the project-based Article 7 permits, and we're starting to get some questions. That's why I came with some of the clarity today. So we are starting to see some of those requests coming in, or let's say feelers for how it would work, what are the mechanisms, and we have gotten one request already for a larger project, and that request has been expedited as well.
Thank you, Minister Lee. Just so our media partners know, we will only be doing 2 rounds of questions this morning. Lyndon Brown of BCN TV, you have the floor.
Good morning to the people of St. Martin and the ministers that are present. To Mike Ferrier, sad to say that you're leaving. And the question will be, the CFT, and I can hear your voice, you're not satisfied with the government-owned company. They are not auditing their finance properly. According to your statement, there's some inconsistency. I mean, your time is very short, but can you tell us again what you would like to see?
I think I was pretty clear what I would like to see, but I believe, just like me, you read the newspapers too, right? And in fact, you report the news, and we've seen, in my opinion, too many times that people are being questioned and being put in a position where they have to be questioned. So transparency and openness in not only government, but government-owned companies is extremely important. And I believe that we all, as an island, need to rise to another level with regards to integrity. When I say integrity, I mean the display of integrity also. When somebody would question my honesty, I would take a back seat and go fight my case and not be in the front row and want to be rough and tough. But, you know, I would withdraw and go fight my fight to clear my name, because a man only has his name. And that's all he should cherish. And you shouldn't want to be in a situation where you throw all of that aside and just for the position or just for the place that you hold. Integrity, especially in a company that is owned by the people of St. Martin, is important. Openness of how you do business, important, and do it in the correct fashion. It's not yours. And again, nobody, as far as I'm concerned, is guilty until proven such. Everybody's innocent until then. And also, I think it's important for whoever investigates, be it government or be it the prosecutor, whoever investigates, when you find that you find nothing wrong or you find nothing against the person or persons, you should also be big enough to come out and say, hey, these persons have been exonerated, they're clear to go. In St. Martin, too often, a cloud keeps following you all over the place because nobody clears your name, and I think that's wrong too.
Thank you, Minister. Alita Singh of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Thank you, Relaika. Good morning, Prime Minister, Minister Lee, and Minister Ferrier. Minister Ferrier, I've seen you in many incarnations, so I expect to see you again in a new one soon. Prime Minister, speaking about the CFT, of course, soon there's going to be a vacancy, or already is a vacancy on that committee for St. Martin's representative. Has government made a decision or made a proposal of a nominee yet? And perhaps that nominee is now soon to be former Minister Ferrier?
Thank you, Alita Singh, for that question. Indeed, there is a vacancy. We are presently in discussions as to St. Martin's representative on the CFT, but there has been no conclusion as yet as to who that individual will be. And I'm not sure I should say this, but I did ask Minister Ferrier, and he humbly declined.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We now move on to the final round of questions. Stephen Cerulean, PJD2, you have the floor.
My very final question is to the Minister of Finance. Where does St. Martin stand at this time financially? What kind of a budget do we have?
I think you want to know what kind of liquidity we have. We have a budget with a hole in it. Liquidity, we're a little bit better than we thought we were going to be at, but not by far out of the woods. There's still plenty trees out there. We are requesting, in fact, we have just sent a letter out yesterday, last night, requesting liquidity support from the Dutch, which by law has to, is a process. The CFT has to make a decision on that and make an advice, and I believe it's going to be handled by the 6th of July in the Kingdom Council of Ministers, our request. What we've requested is, instead of a big amount, we have requested to do it in tranches as we need. We will ask, and we make sure that every month we give a financial report, and so that every 3 months we will be able to get a tranche as we need, as I said, as we go. Right now, basically, we are suggesting 2 tranches this year and 1 possibly in the early part of 2019. So again, things are tough, but could have been tougher, let me put it that way. And the request for liquidity support in the form of whatever way that Holland wants to provide it, hopefully at minimum in the same form they did the first liquidity support, which was 50 million for 30 years, 0 interest, and first 5 years no payment. That's what we were able to negotiate at the time, and we're looking for more of the same, or better yet, we're looking for possible grants.
Thank you, Minister Ferrier. Lyndon Brown, BCN TV, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you again to the ministers and to the people of St. Martin. Mike Ferrier gonna leave us, and you're gonna, Minister Lee gonna stay on. And Minister Lee, question to you. You still have some projects that are pending. And also you mentioned about people are not signing up for construction. Well, it has been established that there's a lot of work in construction. Now, do you have analysis of the workforce? What's the number in the different category of the workforce and St. Martin? Do you have an analysis of a figure?
I would need to double check, Lyndon, but I would suspect no.
Partially. Can you say something partially?
I would need to double check that. You're asking, so, for example, how many administrative personnel there are on the island, how many construction workers, how many restaurant workers. I don't think we have that in-depth of a statistical base. To be honest, you know, we've talked about statistics and data in general being an issue. I mean, you started off talking about projects. Even, for example, as we look at universal health coverage, just getting a number in terms of what the population size of the country is has been a challenge. I mean, you get numbers from anywhere from 45,000 to 60,000. So, you know, you're talking about a big spread in terms of just population size. So I would guess, based on that, if we have it really broken down as to how many people in the workforce, I would have to double check, but I would suspect we don't have that kind of detailed number. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Lee. Alita Singh of the Daily Herald, you have the final question.
Thank you again, Rolika. Prime Minister, tomorrow you're going to be before Parliament with the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. Could you give the public what is the most salient part of that plan?
Well, thank you, Alita, for that question. The most salient part of the plan, I believe the whole plan is the salient part of the plan because it's the roadmap moving forward for the entire recovery of the island. So choosing one above the other, it would be very difficult. You know, as indicated many times before, there's different stages, the emergency stages that we started out with. Hopefully pretty soon we will be implementing those within short, and then there is, of course, midterm, what we're going to plan to do, and then in long term, what the plans are. So to answer your question, the entire plan is very vital for the island, and I'm hoping for the unification of all political parties in Parliament to support such, as indicated. Over 170 different experts have given their input in the NRRP, so therefore it has been properly vetted. So I look forward in having a fruitful debate in Parliament about the NRRP and hoping for the full support of Parliament.